Hey everybody, it's Julie. Welcome to Hello Monday. Today I'm going to be making a Valentine with a cross-stitched heart. And cross-stitch is really not my forte, so I had to spend some think time figuring this out. So bear with me. I'm going to start with a quarter sheet of Nina Solar White. This is 80 pound. And I'm going to secure it to the A2 piercing plate. This is the original piercing plate. And I'm going to go ahead and send that through my Gemini Junior. And the reason for the washi tape is just to make sure that the quarter sheet of cardstock stays properly aligned so it doesn't go in and run out the other side all cattywampus. I need it to be nice and straight. So now I also did this with a piece of typing paper, and this is how I made the pattern and figured out where my stitches need to go and how many I needed to have to create this symmetrical heart. So I counted down approximately 12 rows, and then I went across the columns 11 to the 11th dot, and that's where I knew I needed to make my very first stitch because I'm trying to center this heart on this panel. So I've marked it with a pencil, and that way I know exactly where the first stitch needs to go. Once I get the first stitch in, the rest will be like a piece of cake. So now I'm just going to use my needle here to kind of start that hole and make it a little bigger so that on the other side, when I have to see where to pull that needle up through, I can actually see which hole. Because if I don't, then I have no idea which hole on that side I'm supposed to come up. So that's why I use the needle to kind of, just enlarge that hole just a little bit so I can see it on the other side. Then I'm going to use some washi tape to anchor my thread down. Now you could knot it if you wanted to, but I was trying to keep things as flat as possible, and I have a tendency to make really chunky knots and they bulge on the backside. So I was like, I'm not going to do that. So I'm working with some embroidery floss. Now normally this is 6 strands on the skein, but I separated the strands so that I've got 2 strands of embroidery floss that I'm working with. I'm going to make 3 diagonal stitches on this side, and then I'm going to count over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And in the 6th hole, I'm going to repeat the same 3 stitches. So I'm going to take my needle and go ahead and mark that hole a little bit by making it just a little bit larger. And then when I flip this over onto the back side, I will know which hole I need to come up through. Now, I did make some mistakes previously, and I had to go back and take my needle off the thread and gently undo those threads. And I'll talk about how we resolve that a little bit later. But mistakes are okay. You just take your needle off the thread and gently pull that embroidery floss back out of those holes and just get right back on track again, and then continue with your stitching. So I need to do 3 total diagonal stitches here on the opposite side. And these are going to be the arcs of each side of the heart. So once I've got my 3 stitches here, I'm going to stop here so you can kind of see exactly what it is we're going for, right? And you can see that there are actually 5 spaces in between, but it's going to get reduced to 4 because I need to come back and do my diagonal stitching the other direction. So I started out going left to right, and now I'm going to go right to left and create my diagonal stitches right over the top of the original set, but going in the opposite direction. So once I get to the end of that 3rd stitch, I will stop, and then my thread will come up underneath and start over onto the next row of those diagonal stitches and complete the whole top row of the pattern. So there you see I've got 3 and 3. Now I'm going to drop down the next row, and I'm going to start 1 hole over to the left of the original stitch. So I'm just going to go ahead and repeat the same process. I'm just going to make these diagonal stitches, and I need 5 this time. So I need 5 on the left, and then I'll need 5 on the right underneath my original row of stitches. So I'm just going to go ahead and do the same process. It's always the same process for creating these stitches. You're going to create diagonals going one direction. When you get to the end of the row, you're going to flip around and go the opposite direction with your diagonal stitches. So here I am. I just got to the other side and I wanted to make sure that I'm doing 5. So I moved to the left of that first row of 3 there. And then you can see when I get to the end here, I'm going to have 5 stitches underneath the 3, and then I'm going to go back the other direction. So I've got 3 and then 5. Now I'm going to hold the camera here just for a minute so you can see what I'm talking about, because I'm having a hard time explaining it. Now I did the next row, and for some reason I switched my diagonal and went the opposite direction, but it really doesn't matter. As long as you're always, diagonal one way, come back with a diagonal the opposite direction. So I finished that side there, and then I'm going to tie this off because I'm starting to run out of thread, and it's getting harder to bring that needle around to the front to pierce that hole so that I know which hole I need to come into from the back side. So I'm just going to trim that off. So when you want to end or switch thread colors, and I switched here to a pink to continue stitching, I wanted to create that ombre effect. All you need to do is just tape it down on the back side where it's going to be out of your way and trim it off, and then secure a new piece of thread and keep going. So I've gotten all the way down to the end, and I'm going to have a very crude pattern for you on the blog. So make sure you go to the link to the blog post down below in the video description so you can see my drawing of what I did and how I got there. So now I'm going to go ahead and fasten this. And once I got going on this, I decided, I don't want washi tape. I'm going to use regular clear cellophane tape. Why? Because it's clear, and that way you won't have, like, if you have any gaps and you can see the color of the washi tape on the back, showing through the paper, you might not like that. So I didn't. So I decided, you know what? I'm just going to wing it here. I'm going to fold this up, and I'm just going to take my scissors and trim that excess clear tape off. And those threads were also kind of like, if the light was shining through, you could kind of see those threads depending on how harsh the light was, and I didn't like how it looked. So I'm just kind of flying by the seat of my pants and figured this would be a really nice solution. And by golly, it worked just fine. And nobody's going to know how messy my stitches are on the back. And now those holes that I mistakenly went through with my needle and thread, I'm just going to use my Teflon bone folder and just burnish those nice and flat again. Nobody will ever know that I made a mistake. And then I'm using the Tim Holtz ruler here because it has a 0 centering feature to figure out how much I need to trim off on each side of this heart to make sure that it's still centered on my panel. So I trimmed off, a 1/4 inch off the top, and then I trimmed off, whatever I needed to using those pencil marks. Now I'm going to create a little tiny banner, and I've already white embossed this sentiment onto a little strip of black cardstock. And then I'm using my scoreboard just to make 2 score lines here on each side of the sentiment. Now this is kind of a long strip, but it's better to have it too long than too short because you want to have enough over length there at the ends to do the next part. So now I'm going to take those score lines and I'm going to fold my little ends. First I'm going to go back, and then I will fold them towards the front. And you'll see how that looks here when I get finished. So there we go. So it's going to create kind of like a dimensional banner. And then I wanted to create fishtail ends. So I'm going to trim off what I need to, and then I will go ahead and come in on the diagonal and make like a V-snip. I don't know what else to call it. I'm just coming in from the corners there. And that one was off camera, sorry. But I have really bad eyesight. So I have to hold things up so I can see what I'm doing. And sometimes that means it ends up out of frame on the camera, and I'm sorry about that. I try really hard, but it's hard when I'm doing anything that requires a lot of detail to remember to like keep checking through the viewfinder that I'm in the frame. So now I'm just going to go ahead and take my trimmed panel and secure that to my card base. This is just a standard Neenah Solar White A2 card. That's 4¼ by 5½ inches once you fold it in half. And then I've got my little banner here. And then to keep that dimension, I decided to support the middle section with some foam pop dots. And that's just going to keep it from like sagging in the center or getting squished or flattened when it goes through the mail. And there you go, a cross-stitch heart with an ombre effect. And make sure you check out my little diagram there on the blog post so you can try this too. All right, go me. I did it. All right, thanks for watching.